Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Think AV Symposium. Today's a special day because we have the AV consultants, some leading consultants in the AV industry, I should say AV, UCC, and signage industry, all joining us today. This is part of the Think AV Symposium series from Sony, as you probably know. Thank you for joining us today, and I'm excited to have you, and I'm excited to introduce our guest. But before we do that, I want to talk about the platform that you're looking at. We've simplified this today for you so that all you have to do is have a chance to communicate with all of our panelists today and answer some poll questions. There's not anything else to complicate this event today. You could just sit back and watch and learn from the experts. So on the right side of the video screen here, you will see the polls and as well as a questions tab. If you want to ask questions of any of our panelists, or if you want me to pose a question on your behalf, all you have to do is type the question in there and it'll show up and I'll ask the question as we have time. We'll also be posting 4 or 5 poll questions during the day. And we want to make sure that you participate in those. So you'll probably notice a little either red or green or dot that'll appear there in the poll tab. But in case you don't notice them, please do. Please look at the poll tab every once in a while. And I'll try to remind you as well. But let's turn to the experts. This is why we're here today. My name is Gary Kay. I'm with the Rave Agency and Rave Publications. I want to thank you for being here today. I'm excited and honored to be the moderator of today's panel of experts. For the most part, either they're all design consultants or they're in the design segment of the AV, UCC, and digital signage industries. So let's introduce them. First, I want to, I'm going to introduce them in order, not necessarily order that they're going to speak, but in order of how they pop up on the screen here. I want to introduce Charmaine Tarula. Charmaine is the Global Managed Services Account Executive for Virex. And I've known Charmaine a few years now and had the pleasure of working with her on a few different events. And I want to welcome you, Charmaine. How are you doing today?
Doing great. Thank you, Gary.
All right. Secondly, we are going to get back to everyone and ask everyone questions. We also have Heather Sidorowitz. Heather Sidorowitz is the owner and president of Southtown AV, and she's a great influencer in the industry, has served on a number of boards and committees, and she's going to have an interesting perspective because she'll have both the design and the integration perspective on our panel today. And then, of course, I have my good friend Scott Walker here today. Scott and I have known each other for about 20 years, the president and founding principal of Wave Guide. As you know, Wave Guide is a big consulting firm, and they're doing some interesting projects because they've been acquired in the last few years, and they've kind of been pushed a bunch of different directions they weren't having to go before. So he'll be interesting to hear from. Next, we have Pete Coleman. Pete Coleman is also known as the Tech Man, is the Chief Technology Officer of PTS. And they're based out of New York, but they got offices all around the world. And he'll have a great perspective. And then, of course, finally, but certainly not last, is John Garamendi. John Garamendi is the Senior Manager of Business Development for the B2B division of Sony Electronics. I'm excited to have all of them today. And let's bring them on camera now. Let's show everybody. And welcome to the Think AV Symposium, mostly focus on design. There's a lot of, we have different segments of our industry here today, and I'm gonna actually pose Scott. I'm gonna pose the first question to you because I know that you'll be prepared to answer this question. But 2020 was definitely not the year we all thought it was going to be. We went into 2020 thinking, "Wow, it's great to be out of 2019," and all of a sudden we're in 2020, and look what happened. But what I want to know is, and I think a lot of people who are on here are going to want to know this as well, is what is the thing? What's the next thing? What is the thing I should be worried about? So we have a mix of about 70-30 end users on here to high-end end users, obviously, to integrators on here. And they're going to be curious as to what is the thing? Like, what is going to be the thing that opens them up? What's the one thing that they're asking for? What should they pivot to? What's your opinion on that, Scott?
Well, the thing is figuring out what the next thing is going to be, right? It's this next normal coming at us. There's no data for it yet. I wrote a blog piece a few months back called The Great Rewiring. And I hearken back to my grandparents going through the Great Depression and how it rewired their brains for the rest of their lives. After that time, they never threw away any food. They saved anything they could ever use again. Well, we're rewiring our brains every day. Will we get into crowded elevators again? No, we should probably take the stairs. That was always a good idea anyway. So what the pandemic has done, I like to say, is it's pulled the future 5 years sooner, right? So whatever our 2025 goals were for going to the cloud or going UC or pervasive video or whatever, that all just happened. It just had to happen very quickly. The good news is we virtualized pretty easy as a society. It worked better, not perfectly. Certainly there are things that didn't virtualize so well, particularly on the education front. I think that's much harder. But on the corporate side, servers held up, bandwidth held up, and we all figured out how to mute and unmute and turn on and off our cameras. The issue is, what are we going to take back into the workplace or this next normal, whether no matter what kind of industry you're in? And we're trying to help our clients figure that out through data analytics, through sensors. And we see that this kind of next future is very much about computer vision, about what we can see about people movement, because it may be a very different profile when we hit this next normal. So that to us is part of the task, is helping our clients figure that out.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of already hit on one right there, and that's IoT and analytics and insights. I think that's going to be something that a lot of companies don't have naturally in their facilities, and they're going to have to add that so that they answer that question that you said, because they don't have that data from before. And even if that data existed before, you threw it all out and you're starting over. So Pete, since we are having to throw that out and start all over, where do we do that? I mean, Scott kind of referenced, UCC projects and how UCC is going to play a big part in that. We've seen the commoditization of video, for lack of a better term. I mean, like who's going to go around right nowadays and say, I want an audio conferencing room there and I want an audio conferencing room there? No one's going to do that. Audio conferencing is dead. It's all about video and audio. Of course, we can't have a meeting without audio, but we can have a meeting without video. But technically, everybody's going to want video. So I know we got to start with UCC, but are you now a smart building consultant? Is that what you're really doing, Pete?
Yeah, absolutely. So we would describe ourselves as a digital workplace experience designer. I know that sounds like a mouthful, but it's more than just the tech. I mean, we're talking about the whole experience, the whole user experience and the journey. And obviously the technology is just the enabler of that in most cases. So to Scott's point, I mean, we're already designing systems here in New York where we're deploying analytical sensors and touchless systems and touchless processes for our existing clients. So we're already seeing that and we're already rolling it out, and that's all about to come online like in the next couple of weeks, actually.
Yeah, and Charmaine, I want to direct the next question to you, because I know that you're part of this, and I know that you've played a big part in supporting your clients and making sure they can get back to work, the ones that are trying to do it as quickly as possible, but also planning for the future, whenever that eventual future is, that we're all kind of back to normal. And you offline, we talked about this before, and you talked about how there's going to be a revolution in reimagining real estate. I want you to describe your sort of vision there, because I think your vision there is very important for people to understand.
Yeah, right now we have a lot of clients that are reevaluating their real estate, meaning, do we need this building? Do we need this many offices? A lot of clients are sending most of their workforce home and giving them the option to come in when necessary or when there's an important event or training. So that means they don't need as much of the AV space. Now, for the AV world, that's where we have to reimagine the solutions, because they're going to need other things in order to engage. So more large format displays within the environment, because everyone is going to be more social distance in the real estate that does exist and is left over. Also, in what Pete and Scott were talking to, touchless, more auto cameras, auto switching devices where no one has to touch anything, presets to make it, as safe as possible for people to collaborate. And so with all of that, in addition to that, they have to factor in their solutions such as Microsoft Teams and Zoom meetings and Zoom phones now, and tie that into analytics to be able to monitor it all and see the performance and get that data and, do some data visualization to see how people are performing. Data visualization is going to be a big thing because, as Scott said, we don't know what's going to happen really we're in a manic state. So we're reimagining as we go. And that data visualization is going to help a lot of property managers and clients really understand where it's going by seeing how people perform when they come back into the space.
Yeah, and I want to remind everyone that this is a great opportunity for you to ask questions and ask our panelists what they think. And there is a poll up there right now. I want you to really quickly go over and click on the poll tab on the top right-hand corner. Are you currently reconfiguring your workplace in anticipation of returning to work? So let's answer that question. I'm sure that a lot of you are, but I'm sure there's some of you that are in the place where that's not possible right now because you have no idea when that might be and you're not able to work on things like you were. But Heather, Charmaine actually sort of hinted at something, and that is more displays in many more places. Does that mean we're going to see a giant resurgence in projection technology in addition to flat panel display technology? What are you seeing clients ask for?
So I think that I think that people pulled back from projection technology right before laser technology took over. Now we're seeing a mix of both, but with the advent of such large panels, getting 85-inch TVs in there, displays, that you can get away with a pretty big display in the conference room and looking at it as the right solution and not just a display or a projector, but how many people are there, who's in the room, what's the distancing, to make sure that we are putting in the right pieces of technology for the room.
Yeah, and John, that's a perfect lead into talking to you because Sony is one of the few companies in the world that makes every kind of display technology, but you're, I think, the only company that makes the entire stream of products from content ingest all the way through display. I would suspect we're going to start seeing some larger format opportunities out there. I mean, there's some sweet spots that exist, obviously, with 55 and 65 and 75, but shouldn't we see some larger display technologies out there? And shouldn't we see some acceleration of this vision of having content everywhere so that we don't necessarily have one place we're focusing so that we can social distance a little bit better?
Yeah, Gary, absolutely. I think going back to what Charmaine had said about the reimagining of the real estate, and what some of the other panelists, all of the other panelists, had said about the utilization of smart technologies and the integration of smart technologies into the display itself. I think there's a couple of things are going to happen, right? Number one, you're right. We're going to see the blending of smart technologies, IoT, sensors, and so on, that are going to do a couple of things. Number one, they're going to help us to make decisions based on data, and I think it's going to take the subjectivity out of a lot of decisions. And I think that's in many instances that's a very good thing, right? So not only for the data visualization in terms of identifying trends, but also for just deciding who's in a room and how many people can be in there at the same time. So I think that's one thing. But again, back to the display technology itself, I think that as we move forward into this new future and our workplaces are reimagined, I think there's going to be a place for all three. When you look at direct view LED, projection technology, and traditional flat panel, they're still all going to exist. But I do think that with some of the changes that are going on in the way of direct view with respect to pricing and availability, you're going to see opportunities that open up that might have been in maybe spaces that were traditionally flat panel.
Yeah, I think everyone would probably agree with that assessment. We're going to see some changes in the way that we're building systems where it seems to me we're getting a lot of call for putting displays in a lot more places. So like a room that would have normally had a front of room might have three fronts of the room in a unique way to address the social distancing issues. I'd love, Heather, I'd love to hear back from you with regard to client asks right now. Have you had, or do you have any clients right now that are saying, hey, we need to go back to our office now, or we need to plan for going back in March or April, and this is the things that we think we need to do? And what are those asks? What are they asking you to do right now?
So we're not seeing, I don't know if maybe because we're in the more of a mid-market in Buffalo, Buffalo, New York, that we're a little bit slower to react, but we're not seeing huge changes yet come into the design. So designs that started when the pandemic started still really came in and went through. We've just finished up a few projects. I am seeing some of these smaller or one-person rooms where if I'm working remote, I can go in this certain room, work there for the day or for a few hours and then leave. On the touchless side, things if there is interactive panels that might already be part of the story, you're asking for extra pens or ways to make sure that that's a safe environment for everybody else. I think it's really this like I feel like second quarter I think is where we're really going to start to see that because whether it was the president or the new year turnover, we all expected this big or wanted this big change to get back to the office, to get back to life as we knew it. I don't think we'll ever get back to life as we knew it, but we have this opportunity now to pull back and create a better environment, a better work-life environment, and better balance.
So the timing of this panel couldn't be better because here we are in the midst of the companies getting ready to start asking us for these solutions. So I think the timing of this could not have been better. I think Sony was genius in doing this the first month of 2021 as setting sort of a standard for what we're going to expect to see. One of the first questions that came in from Paul Rosenberg was, all of you on the panel are involved with touchless solutions. What are you seeing with regard to touchless and in mass notification, life security for companies and educational institutions? Anyone want to take that? Because obviously, security has always been sort of top of mind based on what's happened in schools in the last decade. But I think now we have a whole different level of mass notification security issues to deal with. Anyone who wants to take that?
I can jump into that. So yeah, you're seeing a lot of clients right now that are implementing, of course, the sensory monitors to sense temperature, to see who's coming in, to keep more accurate records of people that are entering the space, not just in higher ed, in security, but also in the corporate realm, and also tying that into their AV systems somehow. So there are corporate clients that are doing that. They're reconstructing that security technology, and we're playing more into the security piece. So that's come in line in the last couple of months because people are trying to figure out for schools how to get that online, and also for corporate environments in preparation for when they anticipate in Q2 for people going back to work. So yeah, that is playing a role.
And the polls are in with regard to reconfiguring workplace. The poll results are in. 53% of you said yes, 46% said no. I wonder how many of the no's are they just haven't been asked yet, though. I'm curious about that because I think it's possible that some of this isn't being addressed yet.
It's not being addressed to, it depends. It's not really always being addressed to the AV side. That's the thing. It depends on, who you're working with. Most companies have an IT/security person, someone outside of AV, a totally different vendor sector that's dealing with it. So we AV aren't always involved in that unless you're an AV house that also does security. And there are AV houses that do that, but not always being spoken with to our side of the house.
And in Scott, your case and Pete's case, y'all are getting involved in projects way earlier than the integrator or the design build firm would, and you're being looked at as business consultants more than AV consultants. I'd say if we went back 20 years ago and we were riding that bus together at that first ISE show, when we kind of got to really know each other, you would have probably called yourself an AV consultant back then. Right. And now I would think that you're a business consultant. So I'm curious, what conversations are you having? But more importantly, who are you having them with? Who are the key individuals involved in that decision-making process today?
Yeah, so to answer your first question a little bit like Pete, we like to refer to ourselves as workplace technology strategists, except we do more than workplace. We do education, we do other types of projects. So it's tough. There's not a good word in English for what we all do on this panel. Wizards of the built environment would be a good one if they'll let us use that one. But what's interesting, Gary, to your question is the dialogue has moved up to the C-suite, and we're not sort of blocked from that anymore. I've had more calls where the CEO of a company is on the, visioning calls. And we used to sort of maybe not 5 years ago be invited to that call. We would be one level down from that call. Now, because what we do is so germane to the functionality of the business, we have to be on that call. In fact, we're leading that call. The architects are on it too, but we're the ones leading the vision for that. And what we're doing a lot of right now is global AV standards, to use the term AV, because it's a perfect time to do that, right? People aren't in the office. We can pilot things. We can, do some deployments in different countries and then say, okay, well, everyone's liking room type A and better than room type B, et cetera. Now let's go deploy that 500 times in 12 countries. So that's happening, right now, which is very exciting. The other thing is, we are embedded with some clients. So we have, on-site people at 40 different client sites. Of course, most of those are virtual, except some of our clients like Merck and AstraZeneca and Pfizer. Of course, thank God they never stop working because we need them. And, so we're seeing that their R&D and production environments have stayed live, but like everyone else, their business side is 5 to 10% occupied. And again, we're trying to help them kind of come back to a workplace. And part of our sort of metaphor is all the puzzle pieces got thrown up in the air during the pandemic, right? So we had this puzzle, wasn't necessarily a perfect puzzle, but it was a puzzle where all the pieces were fit together. Now it's all a jumble. Let's put them back in the order we want them. Let's not just go back to the same office that probably didn't work for 40% of what you were trying to do in the office. And in effect, what we want to do is steal a page from our higher ed playbook, the whole flipped classroom. Let's have the flipped office. Do the heads down quiet stuff at home. Do the noisy collaborative stuff in the office. And, kind of the same way the flipped classroom works. So that's, what we're starting to see people talking about more and more.
It's interesting that you bring that up because this represents something that we've always tried to achieve. Kind of the AV consultant and design build side of the market got started a little bit after the big commercial real estate wave that happened and the re-engineering of classrooms that happened. So by that time, the decisions were being made by contractors that were involved in furniture and involved in walls and involved in electrical, not contractors that were involved in workflow and processes and people. So now that's changed to processes and people and workflow because now we're being brought back in as an industry. So I think this is a good message for the integrators that are out there and the end users out there is the earlier you can bring us in, the better. And I think we're now being brought in earlier, which presents an interesting opportunity of growth in the future, which, and by the way, I want to remind people that we do have polls questions up. The second poll question's up. To best accommodate return to office, what technology or protocols do you envision using? I'd love to hear the example there because there's some great choices there. So go take that poll question as I ask John the next question, because I think Scott hit on something important. Sony has a portal known as the ACE portal. John, I'd love for you to describe that because it's quite unique and it's a great opportunity for many of the people that are on today. So John, tell us a little bit about the ACE portal for consultants and architects.
Sure, Gary. It's it's a one-stop shop basically where it's ungated and there's no paywall or anything like that. It's accessible. What we did was we had some resources. We have a lot of resources at Sony, but we were hearing from the community, the ACE community, that they needed a one-stop shop. They needed one place to go where all of this information for designers, consultants, and architects could access the information they need readily. And you guys know better than I do, when you're in the heat of the moment, when you're in the heat of battle and designing, you need what you need when you need it. And we wanted to make that readily accessible. So across our entire suite of B2B products, we've put all the stuff that you'd expect to be up there, the documentation, the technical documentation, the spec sheets and what have you. But there are also configuration tools for CLED and configuration tools for our PTZ cameras, as well as all the protocol information and so on necessary to put together a working system and one that you guys can be confident in moving forward.
And that also includes BIM files too, for using the Revit platform, and that's different as well, right? Because then in that case, what that allows an architect or a design consultant, I should say, do, is to layer the AV in with everything else and be in the beginning of the project rather than adding it after the project. And when you make a change, it's made globally rather than just on the particular room that change is made, and the as-built are kind of updated in real time. So that's kind of new too, for you to have those BIM drawings available as well, right, John?
Yeah, Gary. Let me jump back in just for another quick second. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things that we heard back from the community very loudly really became a mantra: no BIM, no bid. And we found that in some instances we were at a bit of a disadvantage if we didn't have those BIM files, the Revit files, available to the community. So what we did was we contracted with BIM Object and had them develop a library for our entire suite of B2B products. So it's all of our cameras, all of our flat panel displays, projectors, IP mic and CLED and so on. So all of that's available. It's available for again, free download. All you have to do is register on the BIM Object site. And I know that the feedback thus far has been very positive, and the community is very appreciative.
The poll results, thank you, John. The poll results are in for our second poll. And the answer is staggered work times and days. I was not surprised. I think that the tech, everyone's interested in the tech, but right now they're worried about when can I bring people back, how quickly I can bring them back, and who can I bring back, and what numbers of people can I bring back. That's exactly what we're dealing with in our office actually right now, is to figure that out. And so I'm wondering, one of the new technologies, Pete, and I know that you're really familiar with this technology. You did some of the coolest installs I've ever seen. That Mercedes install that you did back in Sydney was mind-boggling. Some incredible use of LED technologies is the development of DV-LED and the movement towards these all-in-one DV-LED systems. And one of the questions Kevin McDonald asked is, what are our thoughts on what, and I'd like to address this to you, Pete, on DV-LED configured in various bundles, and where should they be best utilized? Because they have these now 100, 110, 130, 200 inch pre-configured systems out there. And by the way, Sony just introduced a B and C series CLED products, and you'll see that from them as well. Pete, what do you think? Is this the prime time finally for DV-LED in this configuration?
Yeah, totally agree with that. I mean, I remember going back probably about 14 years ago when Panasonic had their 103-inch plasmas, and we had a lot of difficulty getting those into buildings. We would take out windows and get them craned in and that kind of thing. And then it would take, eight people to lift it up and mount it. And it was an effort, it was just so difficult. So now we're able to actually configure these on site. So things like boardrooms, classrooms. I think the only barrier really has been the price. We're obviously constantly seeing that price drop, which is a great thing. But I think that it won't be long before you start seeing these larger screens being deployed in especially in higher end spaces. And I'd love to see them, installed into education as well, replacing projectors.
Yeah, and I think that as the price comes down, you'll see it in education, but certainly it's ready for corporate already. And one of the next questions, I'm going to blend my question with Dave Lazecco's question. He asked, I think we can all agree the future workplace is a blended environment of remote and on-premise workers. Like to hear about any of the AV solutions you're deploying for your clients or you're designing for your clients. I'm going to start with Charmaine. Tell me about any of that, because we're going to have, no matter what, the data shows that sometime in 2022, 2023, we're going to have people working from home, at least until then, some percentage. How do you meld them together? What's the key component there? What are you doing?
The key component is talking, engaging, asking. Yeah, obvious, but the main component is really understanding, it depends on industry, right? So I'm in the New York City market, tri-state area, and we work with a little of every industry. So from the corporate side, let's say corporate techs. Corporate techs have the ability and capability to keep most of their workforce at home, but have space within the office to have bigger, more dynamic presentation AV spaces, right? So C-levels of a lot of tech companies, they like to do dynamic presentations, right? Broadcast, streaming. And in order to prepare for COVID, they're augmenting those spaces. They're incorporating auto tracking cameras. So we're doing a lot of design and implementations with auto tracking cameras for those dynamic presenters that love to, move about a lot and, just be animated in their presentation. We're seeing a lot of that. We're also seeing a lot of, on the corporate side, a lot of training spaces being added on. And additionally, the open space concept being redone into closed off mini spaces that have walls or, cubicles and separation so people can become safe. So those are just some of the things that we're seeing from a lot of clients that we're working on actively.
And Heather, are you having any of the clients that you have asking to secure the people working remotely, in the sense that we kind of threw everybody home and said, just connect up and figure out how to get it done. But now our collaboration tools may have security holes in them when I'm using it at home versus at the office. Are you supporting security consulting as well, and some of the issues that are around consistency of collaboration when someone's working from home versus having a meeting in the office? Is this something you've been asked to do yet?
So we're not really touching the security at this point because our clients tend to have an IT firm or someone that's backing them up on that side. But we are getting into more of the software side than ever we anticipated, to help guide them, because this is the first time that some of these small to medium companies have ever done this before. And a huge change that we're seeing is video conference of the past used to be about presenting. Okay, you're all going to be in a room. This person may not be here and is just presenting. And today, and what we're moving towards, it's about collaborating. So now this office meeting that we had and 10 people sat around a conference table, well, maybe only 3 or 4 are in the space, but the rest are home or working from home or elsewhere. They have to collaborate as if they're all in one room. So the ease of use, I can't express that enough. The ability for it to be simple. And, we talk about all this great new technology, but I can't tell you how many rooms I've been in that are not easy to use and really intimidating to the end user. So how important that part still is. And the fact that the room has to operate with, great microphones, and happily we have great new microphones with beamforming technology that's really changed the game, and really excellent cameras to help bring that in together, so that they can collaborate as if they're all in one space. Look at how the softwares alone, how like Zoom, Teams, how far they came from the beginning of the pandemic to just even now.
Yeah, there's a new poll question out right now that says, which technology trend will have the greatest impact on our industry over the next year? That's do we have an answer on that one yet? Let's see here. This is a new poll question, so you have a chance to answer that poll question now. Some of the results are coming in. I want to flip back to the DV-LED question for just a second. John, Sony has some new products and some new technology in the space of DV-LED. I don't think there's anyone in our industry hasn't walked into a Sony booth in the last 3 years and just been blown away. Like, that is the understatement of our industry. When you look at CLED or Crystal LED, what it used to be called, and you walk in the booth and you're just like blown away. Tell us when we're going to see this in the DV-LED space, and what is Sony preparing for with regard to DV-LED? Are we going to get down to those prices that Pete's wanting?
Sure. The thing about CLED, as I call it, CLED Classic, right, which is what you guys have been seeing, is I always say everybody who hears about it wants to see it. Everybody who sees it wants it, but not everybody who wants it can afford it, right? And that's something that we kind of struggled with for a couple of years, but did really well with it despite that. But now, as you mentioned before, we've got CLED B and C coming, and those I think are really going to radically impact the marketplace, in that it's still CLED in terms of the quality and the experience that we're going to be delivering, and I think that's really important. Not only is it important to be able to deliver a solution that has ease of use, as Heather had mentioned, but one that's going to provide I think an experience to folks that do go to the office while they're interacting with others who are remote. And I think that in many ways, new CLED BNC can provide that. Also, with respect to the accessibility and in terms of affordability, yeah, you're going to see that there's a bit of a difference in terms of where we've been able to price these two, and B for brightness and C for contrast. So that's the reason why we have two models, and the brightness we envision being um, deployed out to lobbies and public spaces, where the contrast model is something that we think is going to be utilized and readily adopted in the remote studio space, post production, and so on. So, again, I think that being able to deliver it at an affordable price with an experience that people would expect from a Sony solution is really going to help to impact the hybrid future as people return to the new normal.
I'm, even though, the classic usually refers to the old. I'll take the old, by the way. I actually am perfectly fine with what I saw Sony deliver 3 or 4 years ago. It's one of the few technologies I've seen that's actually that looks just as good now as it did 3 years ago. Usually you have to replace it. And I have a hard time calling the BNC entry level or a change in any way, because they're already, starting way up here. So congratulations on those products. I have an interesting question, because see me with headphones on, and I'm in a room with other people, so therefore I have to have headphones on to actually do an event like this. But surely, Scott, we're not going to be going back and having, because we've solved the video problem. We put a camera on everyone's desktop, and then they can jump into a meeting that's happening in a conference room down the hall that used to seat 8 people, but now can only seat 3 people. But we have to be at that meeting, so we join that meeting. But I'm going to be talking, and everyone around me is going to hear me talking. When they talk, I'm going to hear them. We're not going to have to. What are we going to? We can't wear headphones. Surely that's not the design criteria for solving the problem of an open office environment. What are we going to do, Scott? What are you suggesting? What are you telling people?
So, acoustics. We practice acoustics, and our acoustics work is blowing up right now. We've never been as busy. We're getting these acoustics only RFPs because people have finally realized how important this is. And I'll tell a little story about McDonald's headquarters in Chicago that we did. When McDonald's did this move, it was all about their employees. It was every jump ball the employee won. So the open office has been the bane of many people's existence for quite a while. It's very efficient from a corporate real estate and cost standpoint, but it can be very hard to get work done. So we know how to do it right. Very often it doesn't get done right because of value engineering and cutting corners and, frankly, aesthetics. So we came up with a way to do a very aesthetically pleasing office that works extremely well. And we were giving another big Fortune 10 company a tour of that headquarters, and the woman who was the main client on that tour, she's hearing impaired. And what happens when you lose your hearing is you lose localization. So everything gets summed to mono in your head. And this is why, if folks are hearing impaired, they have trouble at a restaurant, because everything is signal. You can't separate the noise from the signal. And she kept walking around McDonald's headquarters going, I could work here. What did you do here? This is like magic, because you could see someone talking 15, 20 feet away, but you can't hear them. And that's because every surface is absorptive. It might look like wood, it's not wood, it's absorptive. It might look like plaster, it's not, it's absorptive. So start with good physics, good acoustics. From there are some products like Poly's acoustic fence, for instance. It's a multi-microphone thing that says, only pay attention to my audio, please ignore the audio coming from this other direction, and then, cancel that out. But you're right, audio is probably one of the biggest challenges. We don't want to basically say, welcome to the human race, here are your headphones, you'll be wearing these the rest of your natural life. Not unless they become way more comfortable and easier to wear all day. But even then, why don't we just solve it by making a great building? So that's
the more comfortable headphones are the bigger ones. The bigger
Yeah.
they get, the more comfortable they are. The ones I stick in my ear, I can do a 30-minute meeting with, but I can't do a long one. Mike Parks has a really good point. I'd love to hear who wants to respond to this. He's got a great challenge, which is, one thing that as an industry we've never solved is the tech that is at home is easier to use and simpler to integrate than the tech we use at the office. Why aren't we seeing more, voice command stuff like Alexa and Siri kind of stuff brought into the business world? I know the technological. Don't give me the answer. Well, the IT department won't let us do it. There's a little bit more than that, because a lot of it, you can't even just add an Alexa to a Crestron control system and make it work. This is a very complicated infrastructure thing. So I want to know who's addressing this and how do we solve this problem? Because it is a lot easier. When people went back home, we actually could provide little kits for them and say, just turn this on, connect it up, and you're connected now to Zoom or Teams or whatever you're using. But at the office, we can't do that. We have to buy an expensive license. We have to install a bunch of equipment. Where are we going to bridge the difference between doing it at home? I'd love for someone to address that.
Yeah, I'll jump in there, Gary. I mean, this is something that's very close to my heart. I've spoken about consumerization of the workplace, and I can't see any reason why we haven't adopted, smart assistants or smart speakers. I mean, I think there was something like 30 million plus smart speakers sold in the US just last year. So we have them in our home. I've got 3 or 4 at home myself. I think this is the prime time to start deploying these devices. I'm surprised I haven't seen anyone create an Alexa skill as yet that can do that, that can actually control more commercial devices. I know, actually, funny enough, I actually have a number of Sony displays at home. They are all Alexa enabled, so I can actually turn them on and off and change channels and do that, which is great. So the technology's there. Why aren't we deploying it? And, some of the comments I hear, it's about security. It's like, well, we're having private conversations working from home at the moment with these devices turned on. So what's the difference with having those devices in the workplace when everyone does come back? I really struggle to understand why it hasn't gained more traction. But if you're talking about frictionless, you're talking about touchless, it just ticks those boxes. So I'm surprised that the manufacturers and everyone hasn't sort of taken this up more.
Heather, aren't you getting asked that by your clients? Aren't your clients saying, hey, why can't I put an Alexa in here? And when they do, what do you say?
I actually, believe it or not, have not yet gotten that question. I think, again, because maybe it's driven with the integration with the IT department as well, so they know better than to even ask it. I think it's about, this, again, I don't need to harp on it, except that it's true. It's about the simplicity of the system. Later this afternoon, I'll be going to the end of a large client to do a training. They always put aside an hour or 2 for training, and that training, if we've done a good enough job, really only takes a matter of minutes, and then you get some additional questions. So it's about planning and user ability. That space has the ability to schedule different room scheduling panels. They're showing if they're green or they're red. So it's making that easier. We're getting closer to it. But yeah, I do agree that we still have a ways to go to have that be a smart space for the end user.
Yeah, John Caniglio mentions that he actually is putting Alexa in his commercial work. I'm curious if John was willing to post which control system, like how are they ultimately controlling the gear on the back end? Scott, have you ever been in a situation like that yet?
Well, we did a certain CEO's office who should know a little bit about Alexa and did not put voice control in it. Now, this has been a couple of years. We have been talking to the Alexa for Business folks. Interestingly, Gary, I had this debate with a client 22 years ago on a big conference center project. They were like, when is voice control going to be a thing? So it's been in the water for a while. And they threw a Star Trek Next Generation analogy. Well, Picard talks to his, computer. Why can't we? And I said, okay, notice everyone else on the deck isn't talking to the computer. It's because we have all these people in the room. It might get to be a bit much. And back in the day, I was talking to Fred Bargetzi, and George Feldstein and Randy Klein about this. When is Crestron going to embrace this? And kind of saw some of the inherent challenges they were facing back in the day. Now, that was different processing speeds, different, sort of algorithms they could run back then. I do think that day is coming. I do think the security argument's been blown away, as Pete said. It's, really, you're on a Zoom call or a Teams call or whatever call, and, you've got Alexa listening or Siri in your house. So, we like to kind of dog food it on ourselves and try it in our own workplaces first and see where it breaks down, because we don't want, shades and screens and everything moving just because somebody said, can you shoot me a screenshot of that or something, and it thought raise screen or something. So we want to be careful about that.
Yeah, John Caniglio responded Crestron, so obviously they have made it easier. But again, that I think the issue is there's two parts to that. There's the simplicity side of it, and then there's the cost saving side of it. Because in the case of the Alexa in my house and probably in Pete's, it's controlling everything, and it cost me like $700 to do the entire thing. And it's controlling every single thing in my house, including all the lighting and everything. But when you add it in with a Crestron control system, it is a lot more expensive, but it gives you that closed network that is secure and reliable. So you're not just worried about security, but you also got reliability. The poll results are in for the third poll, which was fourth poll, which was which technology trend will have the greatest impact on our industry over the next year? The answer there is artificial intelligence, second data analytics, third AR. And we have a current poll question up. When do you expect postponed AV products to resume? The leading right now is 4 to 6 months, not 0 to 3 months, which is a little disappointing to hear, but at least we see light at the end of the tunnel.
So Gary, can I jump in for a little bit on the AI piece?
Yeah,
now,
please.
I have clients that have asked about the AI piece, and I hear Alexa, there's Google, there's a lot of AIs. The question that a lot of the clients are entertaining is which one is smarter, right? Because a lot of the AIs, if I have all four, and I have about 4 in my home that I'm using and that I test out constantly. And one seems to be, I won't name names, one can recognize certain terms, language much better than the other. So one is learning faster than the other, right? So that's the other thing as well. For the use case, for what the clients want to do in that environment, they're also entertaining which one is more effective. I think Cisco did the Spark at one time, right? They had the Spark and they still have it. They're another manufacturer that's trying to go down the route of AI to make all of their equipment and tools much smarter to deliver that AI experience. But it's going to take more time on the AI side. And that's where a lot of the clients are coming to the conclusion. So it's going to take that work collaboration with those AI developers and working in tandem with the manufacturers to really develop it more for that commercial use.
Yeah, in fact, Nathan Haynes said that they installed Alexa with Crestron, but after a year it got removed because there were too many listening issues. And then a macro runs Josh AI hasn't supported us here in Canada for commercial environments. One of the questions was about Josh AI. Has any of you integrated Josh AI yet in any of your projects?
Mm-hmm.
Not yet. So artificial intelligence is going to be something that people are going to be looking for. It was the number one answer there with regard to, and you started out, Scott, at the very beginning talking about how analytics and knowing who's doing what in an office is the important factor of getting back to work. Tell us what we can expect with regard to AI. What kind of tools can we expect, or what are you trying to drive companies to do, or solutions to provide for your clients?
Well, as you mentioned at the intro, our company got bought by Compass Group, which is the world's largest food service and hospitality company. And they were sort of in the AV business too, and they brought us in. So it gives me a window into the world of, say, food waste, which is a massive problem on planet Earth. And it's going to become a bigger problem when we move back into this hybrid environment, because just because 100 people were invited to the meeting, there may only be 40 people in the room because of social distancing. So we need to understand virtualization. We need to understand through computer vision who's there, who's not there. Dealing with, how do we clean spaces? How do we tech spaces? Maybe it's a very virtual footprint on Mondays and Fridays because people are working from home, and it's a very physical Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So it's about trend lines and being able to have predictive analytics. So we go, gee, Fridays in December, we don't need anybody there because no one's having meetings on Fridays in December. But Wednesdays in September are off the charts. And again, that's very simple, low-hanging fruit. But then, how can you take that about duration of meeting, engagement? Can we start to classify meetings that this was an engaged meeting? Multiple people spoke, multiple people presented. There was a lot of back and forth dialogue. That's kind of where we're going. Sort of AV comes with the data is really what we're after.
Pete, I'd love to have you address the same question because you're in the design side of this. What do you think, Pete?
Yeah, I mean, for us, there's no one system that does everything. There are multiple systems. I mean, anything up to 15, 20 systems. And all those systems, the majority of those systems aren't designed to even talk to each other. I mean, whether that's security, access control, air quality monitors, whatever it may be, it's all technology that's sitting on the network. So you need something there that brings all that together to provide the intelligence, because the standalone devices are intelligent to a certain extent, but when you combine all these technologies and bring them all together, that's when you create smart buildings or smart workplaces. And then what you can do from that point is you analyze that information, you store it in a data lake, and then it helps the client make better decisions moving forward. But yeah, they are customized systems that are brought together via a software layer that has built-in logic to make better decisions. And I also think that the way we should be designing and implementing intelligence in the workplace, we should be treating it like a Tesla. So when you buy a Tesla, it only gets smarter from the day that you buy it. You get software updates that come through constantly. Why aren't we doing that in the workplace? Right, we have the technology there to do it, but what happens is that after the design's done, the installation, the commissioning, the programming's done, everyone walks away and it stays as it is in that moment of time. But the workplace develops, it's agile, it's constantly evolving. So the technology should be evolving with it. And I think once we start doing that, we'll have true smart workplaces.
You're muted, Gary.
There are a couple of manufacturers that may or may not like the analytics that might come from this, because there are some products we might find out we're not actually using in these rooms. So there'll be kind of an interesting, but in reality, what you do is you save the client money, because you find that instead of buying 10 of these, we only need one, and we put it on a cart and move it around as we need it. Craig Park, who we all know, respect as one of the founding members of the AV consulting business, asked the question in 2023, when we are out of the pandemic, and are we still hybrid? Have we returned to work because we solved all the HVAC and air quality issues? Charmaine, what do you think?
Absolutely, we're still hybrid. Like we said before, the workforce is being reimagined. So people are now in certain industries are going to have the option to come in, or it's not even going to be an option. Like, I know a few pharmaceuticals that get rid of a building and sent most of those workers home permanently. So it will be a hybrid solution for, I would say, a good couple of years until, everything pans out, and new technologies, of course, will be factored into that. But I also wanted to go back into the data visualization part that Pete mentioned. We don't only, when we come to how we go forward, we also have to think about not just regular manufacturers. One of the things in terms of data visualization, there are companies that can help clients take all data from all the technologies used for collaboration, meaning WebEx, Zoom, Microsoft, the rooms, take all of that analytic and monitor those analytics and bring that into a graphic or a dashboard where they can monitor that performance. And as Pete said, it's going to be very agile for the next couple of years in terms of technology development. So the key is to stay with the client during that time, to help and grow and evolve with them in terms of, what the performance and the analytics will tell. But the clients have to now start building that infrastructure to grasp that data and information and start developing or working with a company. And a company that comes to mind is Tier PM. They have a great solution which they can monitor those things, bring it all together in one infographic and one dashboard that customers can monitor everything soft and everything hard in terms of collaboration and performance and changes.
Yeah, it's called AV Insight. It's a great product. You should check it out. I want to ask you each one question. I want you to answer this one question with just one word or one answer, because I want the audience to see how, if you haven't shifted your model or pivoted, or what I would hope that is a little bit less than a pivot, maybe more liquidity on the model there. But also as an end user, for those end users on here, that you haven't prepared for this, because Charmaine made a really good point that we're going to be hybrid for a while. Until when? Give me a year. Heather, what year do you think things are get back to as normal as possible?
Forever.
Forever. Okay. Pete?
I would say 2022.
So end of 2022, beginning of 20, like next year at this time, or the end of 2022?
12 months.
Okay, so 12 more months in this situation. Charmaine, what do you think?
24 more months.
24 months. Scott?
Forever.
Forever.
That's
Okay.
out of the bag.
So we have 2 forevers and 1 year and 1 2 years. John, are you going to break some ties here? What do you think? What is your opinion, John?
I'm thinking 23. So yeah, 18 months, 2 years.
Yep. So I say mid 2024. That's what I think. I think mid 2024 we're going to be about back to where we were beginning of 2020. I think, and I think that all the answers here are probably going to end up being right at some level. It'll be interesting. The point is, you should have already been preparing for this, not sitting back and waiting, because the shortest period was Pete's, which is a year away, which means that you still have a year to get through where you're at now.
I'm an optimist, Gary, so I'm always going to be on the low side there.
Well, that's that.
Forever is, and it will never go back to what it was. It will. We've broken it, just as Uber broke taxi cabs and Airbnb broke hotels. What the pandemic did is it broke the way that it's been. So now we have this opportunity to rebuild and collaborate and hopefully become more task oriented and less time oriented, so that we can complete our task and it doesn't matter where we are.
That's really good thoughts there, actually. Charmaine, it looks like you wanted to say something about that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with Heather. I think it's going to be 24 months before we get close to where we were, but it will never really ever, to Heather's point, be exactly the same. We're not going to be exactly back. And we shouldn't want to be, right? We shouldn't want to be exactly back, like Heather said, because everyone has learned that they can work effectively from anywhere, as Heather said. And now that they know and they understand that, we just got smarter. So let's see, what happens after 24 months, how much smarter we get, but it's still going to be hybrid. We're just going to see how.
Scott?
Yeah, so I said forever because I too believe that, we've let the cat out of the bag. And once we all got over Zoom fatigue, about 3 months in, where our retinas were just burning and we were just so sick of back-to-back calls, you start to settle into a new rhythm and you're like, oh, well, this has some advantages. There's a fridge down the hall. There's a bed upstairs if I have to rest my eyes, and I think we're going to have to beckon people back to the office. We're going to have to create something special, because to hop on the train right now, it's easy for Pete because there's no one on the train with him. So he's got a pretty good transit in. But, when you get back in traffic, you're thinking, I could have already done an hour's worth of work and I'm stuck on 285 here in Atlanta. So we have some clients who are seeing that future, and they're starting to talk about designing employee experience centers, not client experience centers. And headquarters may become much smaller, much more like a conference center meets museum meets kind of collaboratory or something. And that could be a very exciting future for all of us.
Yeah, look, I think we have to be careful that we don't just focus on ourselves in this situation, because, I too would probably get a lot more work done if I work from home, but that is kind of a very selfish approach. We as people in the industry, I mean, we need to mentor the younger people coming through. We need to show them the ropes. I mean, a lot of us learnt by others showing us how to do things. And if we take this siloed, isolated approach and it's all about me and I get more work done and I can work from home and and so on, I don't think that's the right approach at all. I think we do need that human interaction, and we do need to educate others and mentor others.
Yeah, we're going to get into the debate section of the symposium here in the next hour. So we're going to have Scott on one side, and Charmaine, Heather, and Pete on another side. We're going to duke it out here because it's interesting. We have disagreement here, but we do have one piece of agreement in that we're going to be a while before we get back to normal. John, I will give you the last word with regard to that. What do you think?
No doubt. I mean, I hate to sit on the fence, but I'd have to agree with both sides, right? Because everybody's got a valid point, and the reality is, there's no mistaking the reality that things have changed. Certain things have changed forever. But Pete brings up a very good point about some of the things that you really only can do in person. So again, going right back to the beginning, what Scott said, the thing is. It's going to be the hybrid experience, and that's what I think we all need to make sure that we can adapt to and design for.
Yeah, one last question that came in, I'll answer, and then we're going to wrap up. Is how do we get a better experience than Team and Zoom if we're going to be in this for another year or two? The person who asked that question ought to check out Pexip. They're not a client of ours. I'm not putting in a pitch for them, but we talked to everyone mentioned Zoom and Teams here. You should at least check out Pexip, because what they've done is made it where you can, inside their platform, make a call from any of the platforms. So there's a way to kind of make this simpler to use. And I think you see a lot of companies working on just the simplicity and the user interface side of it. But I want to thank all of our panelists today for participating in the Think AV Symposium, the Consultant Design Think AV Symposium. Y'all have been fantastic. I'm from the South, so I say y'all been fantastic. And this has been a great debate, but also insight of information into your brains, which is extremely valuable. You all are doing some great work, and I want to thank you for all you've done. I especially want to thank Sony for hosting this. This is a thought leadership set of symposium. We have one next week as well, so check it out. You'll get an email on that to join that one next week. I hope that you'll join us. That's going to be end users, and we're going to talk about case studies and examples of things. But I want to thank John and his team at Sony for putting these together and for building some awesome products. Like Pete, I have a lot of Sony products in my house, and a lot of you, I'm sure on here, have a lot of Sony products that you've integrated in businesses and homes. I want to thank you for the great products and technology, and I want to thank everyone for joining us. So everyone have a great day, and again, to the panel, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks, Gary. Thanks, John.
Thanks, Gary.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.